Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled Kythara, the Eternal Spiral, a Journey of Moonlight, Tides, and Secrets. Illyra stepped off the small ferry onto the sun-warmed dock of Kythara Bay, inhaling the tangy salt air as though it were a long overdue gift. The gentle slap of turquoise waves against the wooden pilings and the soft cry of distant gulls greeted her like an old friend. She let her shoulders unclench as the island's rhythm seeped into her skin, the steady pulse of waves lapping against stone, of seabirds wheeling overhead, of trade winds whispering through umbrella pines. Her bag's light canvas packs painted in soft seafoam green thudded quietly on the sun-bleached planks. She paused for a moment, closing her eyes to let the soundscape settle around her. No buzzing of phones. No hum of traffic. Only the ocean's breath, in and out, in and out. This was what she had been chasing for months, a place unhurried, where time curled like smoke and wound down the narrow stone streets in the island's heart. She turned inland, where a cobblestone pathway wound upward, hemmed in by low whitewashed walls streaked with ochre lichen. Bougainvillea vines tumbled overhead in cascades of fuchsia blossoms. Illyra inhaled the faint, sweet perfume and allowed her gaze to drift upward as she climbed, each step carrying her farther from cares back home, the endless Zoom meetings, the steady drip of email. Notifications, the weight of deadlines she'd left neatly in a folder on her desk. At the crest of the hill stood her summer sanctuary, a one-story villa painted a warm cream, with cerulean shutters thrown wide against the bright sky. A broad stone terrace wrapped around its facade, shaded by a pergola draped in grapevines heavy with ripening fruit. Through arched French doors, she could glimpse the cool interior, walls painted the color of driftwood and floors tiled in pale terracotta. Her host, an elderly islander named Darius, emerged from the doorway. His skin was etched by years of sunshine and salt, and his eyes sparkled with gentle warmth. He greeted her with a low bow and handed her a small clay bowl of candied orange peel soaked in local honey. "Welcome, Illyra," he said in a soft voice that reminded her of wind over pebbles. "You have arrived just in time for the afternoon breeze." She smiled and tasted the morsels, sweet, tangy, and warm with honeyed warmth. Immediately, her senses seemed to realign, her heartbeat slowed, and the tired ache between her shoulder blades began to melt. Darius gestured toward a hammock strung between two stout olive trees on the terrace. White linen slung between the silvery trunks swayed invitingly in the breeze. After dropping her packs inside, she settled into the hammock. The boat's gentle creak beneath her and the rustle of vine leaves overhead wove a lullaby that tugged at her eyelids. She closed her eyes, permitting herself to drift. When she opened them again hours later, the sky had softened to an indigo ribbon by the horizon. Lanterns flickered on, casting a golden glow across the terrace. That evening, Darius guided Illyra down winding stone steps toward the island's central plaza, an enclave paved with cobbles polished by centuries of bare feet. They passed shuttered storefronts painted in pastel blues and pinks, their doors propped open to show woven baskets, hand-loomed linens, and jars of sun-dried tomatoes packed in olive oil. The air here smelled of garlic and rosemary, simmering in clay pots at the edges of open kitchens. A quartet of musicians, mandolin, flute, hand drum, and double bass played a lazy, lilting tune beneath a canopy of string lights. Illyra watched as locals danced quietly in pairs, steps gentle and unhurried. She joined a table of smiling islanders, its surface strewn with plates heaped high, bruschetta topped with fresh tomatoes and basil, grilled octopus brushed with lemon garlic oil, and a loaf of still warm focaccia. A jug of chilled rose-tinted pale pink sat at the center, condensation beating on its side. As she sampled each dish, flavors bright and honest, she felt gratitude bloom within her chest. Conversation drifted easily, laughter, memories of fishing trips, debates on the best hidden beaches, and whispered rumors of a secret cove only known to a few. One young fisherman named Casper spoke of an old sea cave carved into the island's northern cliffs, where shafts of sunlight broke through openings in the rock ceiling to illuminate the emerald water below. Only those with a steady hand can navigate the narrow entrance at low tide, he said, eyes widening. But if you make it inside, it's like stepping into another world. Illyra's heart raced with excitement. Here was an adventure waiting, a secret beckoning her to explore. Tonight, though, she simply listened to the tide of voices around her and reveled in how easy it felt to belong, if only for these perfumed, starlit moments. The next morning, dawn seeped softly through sheer curtains in her villa, painting the room in pastel hues of lavender and gold. She slipped out onto the terrace barefoot, still clad in her nightshirt, and sipped a cup of dark, strong coffee that Darius had left cooling by the open door. Clouds of aromatic steam rose from the mug, mingling with the morning breeze that tasted faintly of salt and wild thyme. Illyra closed her eyes, leaning against the cool stone balustrade, and let the gentle rhythm of the seaside wash over her one more time before venturing onward. She resolved that today she would seek out Casper and ask him to guide her to that hidden cave. After so many weeks spent planning the perfect getaway, she had finally arrived at the place where every moment shimmered with possibility, and she would not let it slip by uncharted. With a deep breath that carried away the last traces of her old life's anxieties, Illyra set her coffee cup down and stepped away from the railing. Her sandals waited by the door, and beyond them lay winding lanes to explore, secret coves to uncover, and friendships to cultivate under an open sky. Thus, with heart open and senses keen, our heroine embarked on the first true day of her island odyssey, where each sun-dappled step would lead her deeper into a world of serenity and wonder, and where the horizon of her own story stretched wide and inviting before her eyes. Illyra lingered on the terrace until the sun stood high enough to warm her shoulders, then slipped into a simple linen dress the color of pale sand. She tied her hair back loosely with a strip of fabric, soft rosewood blossoms caught in its folds and laced on her sandals. Inside, she grabbed the small leather satchel Darius had left by the door, its flap secured with a brass button. It contained a folded map of Kythara's winding paths, a water flask, and a slender journal bound in green hide. Stepping onto the cobblestones, she inhaled the morning's heady scent of grapefruit blossoms and seaweed. The village lay quiet now, most locals still asleep after last night's revelry save for a few fishermen hauling in their nets at the small harbor. The wooden piers creaked under their weight, and the sun glinted off the wriggling silver shapes they pulled up in woven baskets. Illyra scanned the boats, searching for Caspar's vessel, a sturdy skiff painted with curling white waves against a deep blue hull. Its name Solstice Song was scripted in elegant letters on the stern. She spotted him leaning over the side, checking rigging, and grinning when he saw her approach. "Good morning, Illyra," he greeted, jumping onto the dock with practiced ease. He was tanned and lean, with short dark hair that hung damp from the morning salt spray. His eyes were a clear hazel, flecked gold in the sunlight. "Morning, Caspar," she replied, offering the clay mug of coffee Darius had brewed. He took it with a grateful nod, savoring the first sip with a contented hum. "Thank you. I'm ready whenever you are." He gestured toward the skiff. "Let's weigh anchor and head north. The tide will be low in another hour. We'll have just enough time to slip inside the cave before the entrance narrows again." They climbed aboard. Caspar pushed off, guiding the skiff through the gentle swell with the long wooden oar. Illyra breathed in the spray-laced breeze, scanning the cliffs rising from the water's edge. Here, the stone ranged from warm terracotta to pale ivory, streaked with veins of russet and gold. Wild thyme and sea fennel clung to cracks in the rock, releasing sharp, herbal aromas with each gust. As they rounded the headland, Caspar pointed to a narrow crevice half hidden by overhanging vines of sea grape. "There," he said. "Entrance to what the locals call the Emerald Hollow. Follow me closely. There are jagged rocks just below the surface." Illyra nodded, heart pounding with anticipation. She had dreamt of this moment and now it lay before her, silent and waiting. Caspar eased the skiff forward. At first, the water was a muted gray-green, shifting to deeper jade as they entered the cavern's mouth. Sunlight filtered through cracks overhead, each beam dancing on rippling water like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Inside, the air grew cool and sweet. Patches of moss and ferns clung to the damp walls, and the drip-drip of condensation formed soft echoes in the vaulted chamber. Illyra ran her fingers through the cool water at the gunwale, marveling at its clarity. Below, pinned shapes darted between submerged stalagmites and tumbled boulders, shimmering fish the color of jade and topaz. They drifted deeper, guided by shafts of light that arced through hidden openings. At times, the ceiling dipped low enough for Illyra to extend a hand and brush her palm against ancient limestone, its surface etched with faint carvings, spiral patterns and geometric symbols whose meaning had been lost to time. "This place has been sacred for centuries," Caspar whispered. "Legends say it was a gathering site for healing rituals. When the moon was full, women would wade to their waists in the water, chanting to the sea. They believed the hollow purified both body and spirit." Illyra closed her eyes, imagining those ceremonies carried out in candlelight, the scent of incense mingling with brine. She traced her fingertip over one spiral carving, feeling the grooves worn smooth by countless hands. A thrill ran through her. She was touching history itself, an endless chain of seekers drawn here by hope and wonder. They rounded another bend, and the cavern opened into a vast chamber whose walls glowed with an almost supernatural radiance. Thin tendrils of vines clung to ledges, heavy with pale blossoms. The water here was so clear it seemed to vanish beneath the boat, revealing a mosaic floor of polished stones in hues of emerald, sapphire, and moonstone. In the center lay a raised platform of rock, like an altar carved by nature itself. Casper drifted the skiff alongside and secured the bow to a stout stalagmite. He offered Illyra his hand. "Come, let's explore on foot." She stepped out into ankle-deep water, cool and comforting. Each footfall stirred tiny clouds of sand, sending ripples across the floor. They climbed onto the platform, where thick roots of an ancient tree arched overhead, its trunk gnarled with age. Leaves filtered the light, casting a soft, emerald glow that danced across their faces. Illyra pressed her palm to the tree's bark smooth, almost velvety. Beneath her fingers, she could feel a gentle thrum, as though the tree held something alive at its heart. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to listen, the far-off crash of waves, the rustle of leaves, the slow, steady drip of water from stalactites above. In her satchel, her journal waited. She flipped it open and began to sketch the chamber's contours, the altar platform, the carved spirals, the roots descending from above. Each line she drew felt like a promise, a record of this moment, a token of her discovery. When at last she looked up, Casper had left the platform and was wading toward a narrow alcove at the edge of the water. He emerged holding a small, smooth shell the size of a fist, its surface iridescent, shimmering from peach to lavender. "I found this tucked into a fissure," he said, offering it to her. "Legend says those who find the shell on the altar will be granted clarity of purpose." Illyra turned it over in her hands, marveling at its weight and beauty. She slipped it into her satchel and closed her journal with care. "I want to believe that," she said softly. They lingered until the light began to fade, sunbeams slanting toward the cave's mouth and stirring motes of dust in their path. Outside, the tide would soon rise to reclaim the entrance, hiding the secret chamber once more. As they climbed back into the skiff, Illyra felt her heart expand. She looked at Casper, whose hazel eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Thank you," she said, "for sharing this with me." He nodded. "It's yours now too, Illyra. Treat it well." The journey back to the harbor was silent except for the soft lap of water and the sigh of the sea. When they emerged from the cave, the sky had turned a deeper blue, streaked with wisps of cloud. The island lay before them in golden light, as if welcoming them home. Illyra felt change, charged with purpose, buoyed by magic. She knew this adventure was just beginning, that the Emerald Hollow held more secrets yet. With each discovery, she felt herself drawing closer to a new self, one unburdened by deadlines and noise, one open to wonder. Later, as she climbed the stone steps toward her villa, she passed under bougainvillea blossoms and breathed in their perfume. The shell in her satchel rested against her side like a heartbeat. She smiled at the thought of writing to her friends back home, capturing every detail. But for now, she would let the quiet waves settle within her, gathering stories for the nights ahead. and when twilight came again, lanterns glowing like distant stars, she would open her journal and fill its pages with this day's shimmering memory, knowing that Kythara Bay's bomb was only the beginning of her island odyssey. The next morning dawned cool and misty, as if the island itself had wrapped a silken veil across the coastline. Illyra awoke to the gentle trill of bells, faint, distant, yet insistent, echoing through her villa's cerulean shutters. She stretched beneath crisp linen sheets, then slipped her feet into well-worn leather sandals and crept outside onto the terrace. The air smelled of damp stone and wild thyme, and low clouds clung to the distant headland like drifting ghosts. Clutched in her hand was the iridescent shell Casper had given her, its surface cool and smooth. She turned it over, marveling at how it caught the pale dawn light, then tucked it back into her satchel. Today, she had arranged to meet Darius, her elderly host, in the island's central square to learn more about Kythara's secret traditions, particularly the Moonlight festival rumored to take place beneath the island's oldest olive tree. Below her, the village slumbered still, but as she wound her way down the narrow stone path, lanterns flickered on in doorways, and roosters cawed at the edges of small courtyards. The cobblestones gleamed with dew, and water dripped from terracotta roof tiles onto fragrant jasmine blossoms. Illyra inhaled deeply, savoring the raw beauty of this quiet hour before the sun fully awakened. At the foot of the path stood Darius, leaning on a polished walking stick carved with swirling motifs of sea foam and stars. Despite his age, his posture was straight, and his gaze carried the bright spark of curiosity. He wore a faded indigo tunic and loose trousers of canvas, a simple ensemble that somehow imparted a noble grace. "Good morning, Illyra," he greeted, voice low but warm. "I trust you slept well." Her smile was soft. Like a child in a cradle of waves, she replied, offering him a bow of respect in the island's custom. "Thank you for coming." He nodded, tapping his stick once against the stones. "Come, there is much to see before the village opens its arms to the midday throng." They walked side by side into the plaza. As they passed beneath a canopy of olive branches, Darius began to speak, weaving his words carefully. "Kythara Bay's heartbeat is the moon. Since time immemorial, we have honored her in a midsummer ceremony. When the full moon rises highest above the towering olive, our guardian tree, we gather in its shadow. Lanterns are lit, incense burned, and voices raised in song." Illyra's eyes widened. "Tonight?" Darius nodded. "Tonight. You may feel the island's pulse quicken as dusk falls. But before then, we shall prepare." He led her to a small workshop behind the plaza, its doorway draped with woven nets and clusters of dried herbs: sage, lavender, sea lavender. Inside, a circle of wooden tables displayed crafting materials, threads of silver and cobalt silk, tiny glass beads in jewel tones, feathers from seabirds, and clay shards etched with symbols. "Here, we make our moon tokens," Darius explained. Each participant fashions a charm to hang from the olive's lowest boughs, a prayer for renewal, love, protection. When dawn breaks, the tokens often bear traces of moonlit dew, believed to carry blessings for the year ahead. Illyra knelt at one table. Her fingers shook slightly as she selected a length of silken cord dyed the color of moonlight, then threaded it through a smooth pebble sheet collected on the beach, frosted white with tiny flecks of mica. She added a cluster of pale blue beads and tied the knot with great care, whispering a silent wish for clarity and creative inspiration. As she worked, Darius glanced over, smoothing his white streaked beard. "Your token is like you, simple, yet luminous," he said kindly. "That pebble is from tide-swept shore, yes?" She nodded in surprise. "How did you know?" He tapped the map Darius had once shown her. "I have lived here too long. I know every stone and its story." When the charm was complete, Darius handed her a wax-coated parchment, a map of the olive grove trails, marking the path to the guardian tree through olive orchards that stretched beyond a hillside. "Follow this at dusk. Bring your moon token. Seek me there when the lanterns are lit." With the map rolled and secured in her satchel, Illyra thanked him and headed back toward the villa. The sun had climbed higher, now gilding white walls and casting sharp shadows across the plaza. Birds flitted through the olive boughs, and merchants began to unfurl colorful awnings, laying out baskets of ripe figs, jars of honey drizzled with rosemary, and hand-pressed oils scented with citrus. Illyra paused at one stall where a young woman with auburn hair braided with daisies offered bruschetta topped with roasted garlic and fresh basil. "For your journey this evening," she said, pressing a plate upon Illyra's palms. "A bit of fuel for the festival." Illyra accepted gratefully, then wandered among the stalls, tasting sun-kissed cherry tomatoes and sampling wedges of tangy goat cheese. Each flavor reminded her why she had come, to immerse herself in a world where each moment was enough, each memory treasured. By afternoon's golden hour, she returned to her villa to rest. She reclined in the hammock beneath the pergola, reading through her journal entries, sketches of the Emerald Hollow's cathedral-like chamber, notes on the spiraling carvings, and the shells. Shimmering promise. The breeze whispered through the grapevines, fanning the pages, and she drifted into a light doze until the clarion call of church bells jolted her awake. She dressed in a flowing skirt of moonlight gray and a blouse that shimmered like dew, then secured her hair with a silver comb. Her token hung around her neck on its silky cord, swaying against her chest. She gathered the plate of bruschetta, a flask of cool water, and her satchel, then set out for the olive groves. Twilight had begun to taste the air when she reached the edge of the grove. The olives hung heavy on gnarled branches, and lanterns, white paper lanterns painted with silver moons, floated among the leaves, glowing softly. Lantern-lit pathways wound between olive trunks, leading toward a brighter halo of light where the guardian tree stood, its ancient trunk knotted and broad. She slipped through the aisles of silvered olives and paused to admire offerings tied to low branches, charms of seashells, ribbons, hand-carved wooden symbols. Each shivered gently in the breeze, catching lantern light like tiny stars trapped in the branches. Approaching the clearing, she spotted Darius standing sentinel by a stone altar wrapped in vine tendrils. He nodded to her, and she stepped forward, heart pounding with the magic of this moment. The village musicians, a harpist, a flautist, and a soft-voiced choir, began to play a haunting melody that soared on rising chords. Darius raised his staff, and the courtyard fell silent. "Welcome, children of the moon," he intoned, voice carrying through the grove. "Tonight we honor her light, her guidance, her endless cycle of renewal. Let us remember, when the world is dark, we need only look up to see her glow." At his signal, the villagers began to tie their tokens to the lowest boughs. Illyra stepped forward and found an empty, draping branch within reach. She passed her charm through the olive leaves and secured it, murmuring her silent prayer for clarity. As the knot tightened, a single silver lantern swung loose from a higher branch and drifted down, setting among the tokens. At that moment, the full moon emerged from behind a thin cloud, bathing the grove in soft, ethereal light. The lanterns gleamed brighter, and the tokens glinted like dewdrops reflecting celestial fire. A hush fell nearly reverent in which every breath seemed to stretch, every heartbeat resonant. Then the choir began to sing, voices rising in harmony, weaving a tapestry of notes that soared through olive branches and brushed the moon itself. Illyra closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, filling her with awe and belonging. Here, under the ancient olive, she felt the island's essence, a blend of earth and sky, of memories and dreams, of quiet solitude and communal celebration. When the final note faded, a cheer rose soft but joyful, and lanterns were passed among the villagers, each person holding one aloft while sharing wishes for the coming year. Darius approached Illyra, his eyes reflecting moonlight. "What do you wish for, my child?" Illyra hesitated, then replied with a steady voice, "To carry this peace within me, even after I leave these shores." Darius smiled, pressing his hand over hers. "Then it shall be so." They stood together beneath the guardian tree, surrounded by lanterns, tokens, and the steady silver gaze of the moon. Illyra watched as her charm swayed among the others, one of many stories woven into Kythara's living tapestry. And in her heart, a new chapter began to unfurl, one of purpose, connection, and the promise of magic shared under moonlit skies. As the festival danced on into the night, Illyra knew that no matter where her journey led, this moment bathed in lantern glow and olive-scented breeze would remain a beacon of hope and wonder within her soul. Dawn broke over Kythara Bay like a promise painted in pastel pinks and golds. Illyra emerged from her villa still wrapped in anticipation, her senses alive to every stir of the island's morning ritual. The soft murmur of waves blended with the clip-clop of donkey hooves on cobblestones and the distant clang of a bell that rang for the day's first blessing. She tucked her journal and pen into her satchel, then fastened a shell Casper had given her to a loop on the flap. Today she planned to meet Mariana, the island's renowned herbalist, at the sunrise market, a weekly gathering of vendors atop a gentle rise overlooking the sea. Rumor had it that Mariana possessed secrets of the island's rare flora and might guide Illyra to the hidden Caldera shrine, where legend spoke of an enchanted spring whose waters mirrored the moon's power beneath the earth. The path to the market wound through olive groves still heavy with morning dew. Illyra paused to breathe in the scent of damp bark and crushed thyme, then continued, her footsteps soft on the narrow trail. At the crest of the hill, she saw the market unfolding, stalls draped in fabric dyed bright as bougainvillea blossoms, pottery pitchers brimming with fragrant oils, and baskets heaped with herbs whose names she could only guess. Mariana stood beside a table piled high with bundles of fresh rosemary, sage, and bay laurel tied in little sheaves with twine. She was slight and spry, with hair the color of autumn chestnuts and eyes that sparkled like dew-kissed leaves. As Illyra approached, the older woman looked up and smiled, revealing a row of small gold earrings shaped like acorns. "Illyra, welcome," Mariana greeted, her voice warm and melodic. "I saved the best bay leaves for you, perfect for your stew tonight." She handed over a bundle of glossy bay sprigs. Illyra inhaled their resinous aroma, feeling the subtle buzz of vitality that came when one was in true communion with nature. "Thank you, Mariana. I've also come about the Caldera shrine," Illyra said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Casper mentioned a hidden spring beneath the old crater. I want to seek it. Will you guide me?" Mariana's expression turned thoughtful. "The path is not for the faint of heart," she cautioned. "The Caldera slopes can be treacherous, and the shrine lies beyond tangled briars that guard its entrance. But if your heart is steady, I will show you the first markers." She motioned for Illyra to follow and led her to a quieter corner of the market where a narrow goat track dipped between low stone walls. As they walked, Mariana pointed out various plants growing wild along the path: the silver-leafed oregano that thrived in rocky soil, the slender stalks of mountain fennel, and clusters of tiny flowers known as moon drops that only bloomed under nocturnal moonlight. "Illyra, each plant here holds a story," Mariana explained, plucking a stem of oregano and brushing it between her fingers. "This one was used by fishermen to ward off storms. That one," she tapped a spray of moon drops, "is said to carry the whisper of tides in its petals. Together, they will prepare your spirit for what lies ahead." By mid-morning, they emerged at the base of the old volcanic caldera. The slopes rose in concentric rings, terraced by crumbling stone walls that once held vineyards but now served only as relics of the island's more industrious past. The air cooled as they climbed, carrying the tang of sulfur beneath softer scents of wild mint. Nearing a rocky outcrop, Mariana halted. "Here is the first marker." She pointed to a carving on the side of a boulder, an interlaced circle and crescent moon, weathered but unmistakable. "When you see this, you know the shrine lies just beyond the thicket." Illyra knelt to trace the carving with her finger, feeling the weathered grooves beneath her skin. A thrill of anticipation coursed through her veins. She rose and shouldered her satchel. "Thank you," she said, meeting Mariana's gaze. "Shall I continue alone from here?" Mariana nodded, stepping back into the shade. "I will tend the market and pray for your safe return. Trust your instincts, and do not tarry once you find the spring." With a grateful smile, Illyra pressed onward, the path narrowing as it led into a tangle of low-hanging branches and bramble rows. She pushed aside thorny vines, careful not to tear her dress, and followed the moss-covered stones that marked the shrine's outer boundary. Suddenly, the air shifted, the brambles opened onto a small clearing whose floor glimmered with a sheen of moisture. At its center lay a pool no wider than a cradle, its surface a mirror so still it reflected the sky above as though capturing a fragment of heaven. Around its edge, Smooth stones arranged in a circle formed a natural bench. Silver moonlight, though it was noon, seemed to linger here, suffusing the glen with otherworldly glow. Illaра's breath caught. She knelt at the pool's edge, letting her fingertips skim its surface. The water was cool as liquid glass, and ripples she created seemed to echo backward, as if whispering secrets to themselves. She closed her eyes and listened, a faint susurration, like voices just beneath the threshold of hearing. Leaning closer, she peered into the depths. At first, she saw only her reflection, her earnest face, framed by dawn-kissed hair. Then just beneath the surface a pale shape materialized. It seemed like a carving of a figure draped in flowing robes, though she could not be certain if it was a mirage of light, or something formed within the water itself. A soft sigh escaped her lips. She felt a surge of connection, of ancient memory stirring within her blood. With trembling resolve, she reached into her satchel and withdrew the silver moon kimono ribbon she had worn the night of the festival. She carefully tied it to one of the stones, whispering, "I seek truth and purpose, that I may carry your wisdom outward." The moment she tied the knot, a current of warmth ran through her fingers, as if the pool acknowledged her vow. She straightened and pressed the palms of her hands together, offering silent gratitude. Above, a stray breeze rustled the leaves, and for an instant, the grove seemed to exhale. Illara inhaled deeply, feeling her spirit buoyed by the pool's resonance. Though she knew not what form the shrine's blessing would take, she sensed that her island odyssey had reached a turning point. Retracing her steps, she emerged from the thicket to find Mariana waiting at the goat track's edge. The herbalist's eyes twinkled with quiet pride. "You have found it? Walk with me back to the market, I have something for you." They descended together, and as they passed the olive groves, Mariana plucked sprigs of wild mint and tucked them into Illara's satchel. "For clarity," she said. Then, pressing a small vial into her hand, she added, "This is tincture of moon drops. Drop 2 into your water tonight, and let the night speak to you in dreams." Illara smiled, her heart brimming with gratitude. "I will," she promised. "Thank you, Mariana." As they reached the sunrise market once more, the late-day sun gilded the stalls in honeyed light. Illara paused, glancing back toward the caldera's silent slopes, feeling the island's pulse thrumming beneath her feet. In her satchel, among herbs and vials and the iridescent shell, lay new markers of her journey, the pebbled carving, the shrine's silver pool, and now the promise of dreams yet to come. She turned to Mariana. "Tonight, I will return to the villa and drink the tincture beneath the moon. And tomorrow, I seek out Casper again, for there are more wonders to uncover in Kythara Bay." With that, Illara stepped forward into the market's warm bustle, each breath steeped in possibility. And as the sun dipped toward the horizon, she felt the island's magic settle upon her like a cloak, ancient, enduring, and hers to wear. Illara woke before dawn once more, the memory of the caldera's sacred pool still humming softly in her mind. Even as the first pale fingers of light brushed the horizon, she felt the pull of Kythara's deeper mysteries beckoning her onward. Today, she had arranged to meet Casper again, this time, not for the hidden cave, but for an expedition to the lagoon where local lore spoke of a shipwreck lying beneath tranquil waters. They said the galleon had gone down centuries ago, laden with silks and spices bound for distant lands, and that its ghostly timbers still slumbered beneath layers of seaweed and barnacles. By the time Illyra reached the small marina, the sky had lightened to rose and lavender. Caspar stood waiting beside the solstice song, dressed in simple white linen and clutching a pair of old diving goggles tied together with faded rope. His dark hair was tousled by the breeze, and when he saw her approach, a mischievous grin spread across his face. Ready for a different kind of dive today? Illyra laughed, feeling her heart lift at his easy camaraderie. Ready as I'll ever be. Lead the way. They pushed off into calm, glassy water. As they passed the mainland cliffs, the sea shifted from pale turquoise to deeper sapphire, the sunlight darting through like liquid diamonds. Illyra peered over the rail, spotting schools of silvery fish that parted before the skiff, then reassembled behind in synchronized arcs. She felt as if she were crossing an invisible boundary into another realm, one governed by currents and hidden histories. After a short journey, Caspar pointed to a shallow reef topped with wind-tossed rocks. Here, he said, pointing to a marker buoy tied to an iron ring sunk into the seabed. They call this the Galleon's Rest. The entrance is just beyond the reef, where the water deepens. Illyra nodded and slipped her satchel to the deck. She accepted the goggles Caspar handed her, secured them over her eyes, and took a deep breath. The cool air felt electric in her lungs. Caspar gave her a gentle push, and she dove in, the world above muffling to a soft green glow. Underneath, the reef's coral blooms swayed in the current, offering silent welcome. The water was warmer here, and sunbeams cut through the surface in pale shafts, illuminating the sandy bottom. Illyra kicked gently, letting the weight of the water buoy her downward until she saw the unmistakable curve of a wooden hull half buried in silt. Ropes coiled on deck, cannons still in their iron carriages, and fragments of brightly colored silk fluttered like spectral banners in the current. Her breath caught. The ship's timbers were bleached by salt and time, but she could sense the craftsmanship still intact, the precision of planks fastened with polished nails, the carved figurehead at the prow, its form lost to decay yet still evoking pride of journey. She drifted closer, careful not to disturb the sand that might obscure the view. Caspar surfaced beside her, tapping his shoulder to signal. He pointed toward a small cargo hold entrance, where broken shutters revealed treasures half exposed. Illyra followed his gesture and saw a cluster of ceramic jars decorated with cobalt dragons and lotus patterns. Though encrusted by barnacles, the jars gleamed faintly, each shape familiar to her from art galleries back home. Divers had tried to retrieve these relics before, but many pieces remained undisturbed, silent guardians of a tragic voyage. She reached out to touch one jar, but paused when she felt something, an electric tingle, as if the vessel still remembered the hands that crafted it. Drawing back, she swam upward for air, her mind buzzing with questions. What had been on this ship's manifest? Who had sailed aboard, and what storms had claimed them? When she surfaced, Caspar offered her his hand and a grin. Every time I see this wreck, I wonder about those who never made it to shore. Their stories are sleeping beneath the waves, waiting for someone to hear them again. Illyra nodded, tucking the idea away. She knew her own story was weaving into these fragments of past lives, drawing her deeper into Kythara's layers of memory. They climbed back into the skiff, dripping and exhilarated, and Casper handed her a towel and a flask of cool water. "We'll return tomorrow with bags to collect small artifacts," he said. "But for now, we'll keep the galleon's secret intact. Some treasures belong to the sea." Back on land, Illyra changed into dry clothes and headed toward the village square, planning to visit the little museum where locals displayed any artifacts that washed ashore. The midday sun had warmed the cobblestones, and the air brimmed with scents of roasting lamb and citrus groves. She exchanged pleasantries with the vendors, promising to return with the diver's guidebook she had been studying. Inside the museum, rows of glass cases glimmered under vaulted ceilings. There, she found fragments from other shipwrecks, coins stamped with faded insignias, broken cutlery whose handles depicted mythical creatures, and fragments of cloth that still held faint dyes. She imagined these belonged to travelers from distant ports, merchants chasing profit, families seeking new beginnings, sailors longing for home. Each piece was like a page ripped from a book, begging to be pieced together. A soft voice behind her said, "You have an eye for detail." Illyra turned to see the museum curator, a slight man named Theo whose spectacles reflected the sun outside. His white hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and his sleeves were rolled up to reveal ink-stained forearms. "I've seen you diving out there," he continued. "Many collectors would prize the jars you saw, but I'm glad you respected their resting place." Illyra smiled. They felt alive. Like they still carried a spark of the past. "I want to understand their story before anything else." Theo nodded thoughtfully. "Stories are what bind us to these objects. If you'd like, I can share what I know about the galleon's last voyage. It set sail from Alexandria almost 3 centuries ago, carrying saffron, silk, and porcelain meant for Venetian markets. A fierce storm drove it onto this reef, and few survived." He beckoned her to a faded map pinned on the wall. With a pointer, he traced routes across the Mediterranean, skimming over treacherous straits and currents that funneled into the Tyrrhenian Sea. Illyra followed along, enthralled. The map's faded ink and water stains only deepened her fascination. "They called it the Selene's Grace," Theo said. "Named after the moon goddess, for safe passage beneath her watch. She betrayed them instead, casting her tides into a deadly swell." Illyra's chest tightened at the irony. She thought back to the Moonlight festival and her own bond with lunar cycles. She asked, "Is there any record of what happened to the ship's captain? His name, his letters?" Theo hesitated. "There was a ledger recovered years ago, but it vanished mysteriously. Some say it's hidden in a private collection on the mainland, locked away from scrutiny. I suspect someone sold it for profit, rather than preserving its historical value." Illyra frowned, determined. I'd like to see that ledger. It might help us honor these lives properly. Theo studied her, then nodded. I'll send word to a colleague in Naples. If the ledger exists, we'll find it. In the meantime, here he handed her a vellum booklet bound with linen. This is a transcription of the ship's manifest compiled from oral histories and fragmentary documents. It's not definitive, but it may guide your search. Grateful, Illyra accepted the booklet. As she tucked it into her satchel, a soft breeze stirred the pages, and for a moment, she imagined the Selene's grace afloat once more, racing beneath moonlit skies toward distant horizons. Leaving the museum, Illyra paused in the plaza, breathing in the vibrant tapestry of village life. Children chased goats along the lanes, merchants hawked their wares, and somewhere, a blacksmith hammered gleaming metal. Everywhere she looked, threads of past and present intertwined like the locus of her own journey, stitched together by chance and choice. She returned to her villa at dusk, the sky streaked with swaths of apricot and violet. On the terrace, she laid out her finds, a handful of coral pink beads from a fragment of necklace, a piece of glazed pottery painted with a golden lotus, and the silver moon ribbon from the olive grove. Beside them lay the vellum booklet, its pages whispering promises of discovery. Under the glow of lanterns, Illyra traced each item gently, feeling its weight and texture. In her journal, she recorded sketches of the shards and notes from Theo's lecture. Outside, the sea murmured against the shore, and for a moment, she sensed the faint echo of the galleon's timbers creaking beneath waves. With a deep breath, she closed her journal and draped the page's corner with a sprig of rosemary, an offering to the sea and its keepsakes. In the hush, she whispered a vow, to honor the Selene's Grace's story, to recover lost fragments of truth, and to weave them into Kythara's living tapestry. As she extinguished the lantern and slipped into bed, the shell Casper gave her rested atop her blanket like a silent guardian. In the darkness, Illyra felt a gentle pulse, a heartbeat shared between memory and momentum, anchoring her to this island of sunken secrets and moonlit rites. And in her dreams that night, she walked along a plank strewn with driftwood and coral, the specter of the galleon's captain awaiting her at the bow, eyes alight with gratitude for the stories she would carry to the surface. Illyra awoke to the faint silver light of a waning moon filtering through her villa's shutters. The vial of moon drops tincture rested on her nightstand like a beckoning promise. Recalling Mariana's instructions, she uncorked the delicate glass and dropped 2 iridescent beads into a cup of cool water. The liquid shimmered, reflecting pale arcs of light as if the moon itself hovered in her mug. She lifted the cup in a quiet toast to the night's unfolding mysteries, then drank deeply. The cool sweetness spread through her chest, calming every anxious tremor. Slipping back beneath the covers, she closed her eyes and let the island's lullaby waves against stone, rustling leaves, the distant call of night birds wash over her. In the realm between wakefulness and sleep, Illyra drifted into a dreamscape suffused with lunar glow. She stood on a cliff's edge, the night sky above a riot of stars. Below her, the sea mirrored constellations in shifting ripples of silver. In her hand, the iridescent shell Casper had given her pulsed like a living thing, its heartbeat synchronized with the cosmic tide. A figure emerged from the mist, a woman draped in robes of moonlight, hair braided with seaweed and stars. her eyes shone with ancient knowledge. She beckoned Illyra forward, and as she stepped, the cliff transformed into a spiral staircase carved of pale limestone, descending into the earth. At each turn, Illyra paused to examine the walls. They were etched with symbols, spirals, stars, and stylized waves. One carving, in particular, caught her eye, two overlapping circles encasing a crescent moon, identical to the marker at the Caldera shrine. Illyra pressed her finger against it, and the wall shivered like water, revealing a hidden alcove illuminated by phosphorescent fungi. Inside the alcove lay a pedestal of white marble. Upon it rested an ancient codex bound in silver-threaded leather. Illyra reached out with reverent hands. The moment her fingers brushed the cover, the Moon Woman's voice echoed in her mind, "Within these pages lie the celestial archive's knowledge of tides, stars, and the bond between sea and moon. Seek the observatory of Kythara, there, the cipher will reveal itself." The dream dissolved like mist. Illyra found herself back in her bed, moonlight dancing across her pillow. The tincture's warmth still lingered in her veins, infusing her with quiet urgency. Heart pounding, she sat up and scribbled a single line in her journal. Find the observatory. Decode the celestial archives. Before dawn had fully broken, Illyra was dressed and packed. She tucked the vellum booklet from Theo, her sketches of the cave and shrine, and the moon drops tincture into her satchel. By lantern light in the villa's hallway, she paused to fasten the iridescent shell around her neck. The shell warmed against her skin, as if affirming her quest. She made her way through the silent village toward the highest hill where the old island observatory stood, a crumbling octagonal tower painted pale aquamarine, its domed roof collapsed in places. Though long abandoned, its foundation remained solid, and locals spoke of it as the Eye of the Moon. Illyra reached the tower by mid-morning. Ivy wove through broken windows, and wild lilies bloomed in its cracked courtyard. She climbed the weathered stone steps, each one worn smooth by centuries of solace. At the summit, she paused to catch her breath and admire the view, the entire island unfurled below, olive groves, terraced vineyards, Kythara Bay's sapphire curve, and beyond it, the open Tyrrhenian Sea. Inside the central chamber, moonlight spilled through gaps in the roof, illuminating a carved stone dais at the center. Its surface was etched with the same overlapping circles and crescent moon she had seen in her dream. Illyra knelt before the dais, touching the grooves with her fingertips. A faint hum resonated beneath her palm, as though the stone carried a muted echo of ocean tides. She retrieved Theo's codex from her satchel and opened it where the binding had cracked. The pages were filled with handwritten tables, astronomical positions, tide schedules, and margin notes in a graceful scrawl. In several places, snippets of text were struck out or overwritten, indicating a cipher at work. Illyra ran her finger along a passage labeled Night of the Green Tide, then paused. In her journal, she had sketched a pattern of spirals found at the cave, a motif repeated in the Caldera marker and now here. Carefully, she aligned the codex with the dais's engraving. The overlapping circles on the dais fit exactly over 2 pages of text marked with faded silver ink. With trembling excitement, she traced the engraving's contours onto the page. The spirals pointed to specific letters in the margin notes. Illyra realized the cipher used lunar phases: new moon, first quarter, full moon, last quarter to shift letters, much like a Vigenera's square but keyed to the moon's cycle. Heart pounding, she set to work. Using her pen, she decoded line after line. Under the emerald waters of the hidden hollow lies the key of Selene, a basin carved of pearlstone. Only when the moon's reflection touches its edge at midnight may the archives be opened. Illyra's breath caught. The message pointed back to the emerald hollow, the cave where Casper had guided her, and spoke of a secret within its depths, a basin of pearlstone that could unlock further knowledge when bathed in moonlight. She pressed her palm to the dais, marveling at the synchronicity of every step, the cave's spiral carvings, the shrine's moon symbol, the codex's cipher, and now this revelation. Her island odyssey was spiraling toward a new discovery, one that would bind sea, moon, and history inextricably. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Illyra packed away the codex and descended the tower's steps, her mind alight with purpose. She vowed to return at nightfall, under a full moon's gaze, to the Emerald Hollow, equipped with knowledge that might unveil its deepest secret. Back at the villa, Darius awaited her with a gentle smile. He had prepared a simple supper: grilled fish with rosemary, olive oil, and lemon zest, a salad of wild greens, and a carafe of cool spring water. Illyra shared her discovery in quiet tones, describing the cipher and the basin of pearlstone. Darius listened, nodding thoughtfully. "The hidden hollow is older than even the Caldera shrine," he said. "Legends tell of a moon basin carved by ancient priests of Selene, lost to time when the sea reshaped the cave. Few have seen it, and those who did whispered of its pearly sheen." Illyra's eyes sparkled. "I need to find it at midnight, when the moonlight strikes just right. Will you come with me?" He rose, his staff tapping softly on the tile floor. "I will guide you, Illyra, but remember, the moon's gifts are given freely, but they demand respect. Speak no needless words when you stand before the basin, let the moon's light do the telling." As dusk fell, they gathered supplies: lanterns with pinpoint beams, extra flasks of water, and Illyra's journal. The night air was crisp as they made their way back along the winding path to the hidden hollow's entrance. The world was hushed, save for the soft susurration of waves and the distant cry of an owl. Illyra paused at the cave mouth, feeling the moon's glow cast a silver path across the water. The shell at her neck pulsed with quiet warmth. She breathed deeply, steadying her nerves, then stepped into the cavern's maw. Inside, the phosphorescent glow she had seen before guided their way along the submerged walkway. The spiral carvings on the walls now shimmered with moonlit luster, pointing them deeper. At last, they came upon a natural alcove where the cave floor dipped into a circular basin carved of smooth, white stone, pearlstone, as the codex had named it. Moonlight filtered through a fissure above, striking the basin's edge in a beam so pure it seemed unreal. The water inside the basin glowed with pale light, rippling gently. Illyra knelt, heart pounding, and placed her hand at the basin's rim. Its surface was cool, vibrating with lunar energy. She closed her eyes, recalling Darius's words. She spoke no words, but let her gratitude and reverence flow through her fingertips into the basin. The water stilled as if in response, then pulsed once, sending concentric rings of silver out toward the basin's center. In that moment, Illyra felt the room expand. Sounds of the sea, night birds, and the moon's distant tides converged in her mind as a single harmonized note. Visions flickered before her, ancient priests tracing symbols in shallow water, the construction of the Caldera shrine, the galleon's proud launch under a full moon, and beyond them all, a lineage of seekers bound by wonder. The moment passed, leaving Illyra breathless. She straightened and looked at Darius, whose eyes glowed with pride. "You have opened the celestial archives," he whispered. "Now the true journey begins." With that, Illyra realized her island odyssey was no longer merely about discovery, it was about weaving the threads of sky and sea, past and present, into a living tapestry that would endure long after tides had claimed their secrets. And as they retraced their steps back to the cave's entrance, Illyra carried within her a gift more luminous than moonlight, the knowledge that she was part of something timeless and eternal, guided always by the gentle pull of the moon. The air was still when Illyra and Darius emerged from the hidden hollow, the moon's pale light vanishing into the black sky as dawn crept along the rim of Kythara Bay. Their lanterns cast warm orbs across the narrow path, dancing over olive groves heavy with morning dew. Illyra's heart thrummed with the afterglow of the celestial archives revelation. She carried within her mind a tapestry of lunar visions, ancient priests communing with moonlit waters, symbols alive beneath her fingertips, and the promise of knowledge encoded in celestial tides. But now another question tugged at her: what was the archive's purpose, and how could its wisdom shape her own journey? Darius sensed her unspoken thoughts and fell into step beside her, staff clicking softly on stone. "The archives are more than memories," he said quietly. "They are a living bridge between sea and sky. But to unlock their songs, we must seek the tide song harp further along the coast, a relic said to resonate with lunar harmonies and reveal paths hidden by darkness." Illyra paused beneath an arch of twisted olive branches, gazing at him in the lantern's glow. "The tide song harp?" she echoed. "Where can we find it?" Darius pointed toward the southern cliffs, where jagged rock fell into churning surf. Beneath the whispering spire, an outcrop shaped like a crescent. There lies a grotto carved by centuries of waves. At its heart, the harp rests upon a stone dais. But beware, only those attuned to moonlit melody may hear its strings. The sun had barely crested the horizon when they reached the base of the whispering spire. The cliffs here rose steep and forbidding, their faces scored by wind and water. At low tide, a narrow ledge led to a cavern mouth half hidden by sea spray and swaying kelp. Illyra spotted the arch's signature curve, kissing the sky like Kalaina's bow in an ancient mural she had sketched in her journal. They descended onto the ledge, water lapping at Illyra's ankles, and stepped into the grotto's mouth. Inside, the world was hushed save for the constant pulse of waves against stone and the distant rumble of the sea's heartbeat. The cavern's walls glistened with mineral deposits that caught stray beams of morning light, scattering rainbows across damp rock. Darius lit a lantern and led the way in, each step echoing on stone. The passage narrowed, forcing Illyra to fold her arms an inch sideways. Her satchel swung gently against her side, carrying the shell of Selene, the codex, and journal sketches. The air here smelled of brine and ozone, and tiny crustaceans scuttled across ledges, their shells ringing like silk on stone. At last, they entered a vaulted chamber whose ceiling arched high above, carved by the sea into a smooth, amphitheater-like dome. At its center stood a raised dais hewn from pale limestone. Upon it rested the tide song harp, a slender frame of driftwood, bleached white by salt and sun, its strings spun from silver-edged sea silk. Ermine moss clung to its base, and clusters of bioluminescent algae pulsed softly along the dais's rim like guiding lights. Illyra's breath caught. She approached reverently, running her fingertips over the harp's weathered wood. Each groove in the driftwood felt alive, resonating faintly beneath her touch. She glanced at Darius, whose eyes glowed with quiet pride. "Place your shell upon the dais and speak the moon's name," he whispered. "Then listen." Illyra nodded, lifting the iridescent shell from its cord. The shell was warm and smooth, its inner curve reflecting the lantern's glow. She laid it gently on the dais, fitting it into a shallow carved recess shaped precisely to its contours. Beneath her palm, she felt the stone hum. Darius stepped back. "Selene," he intoned simply the name of the moon goddess whose power had guided their journey. "Speak it as a prayer." Illyra took a steadying breath, recalling the hush of olive leaves under festival lanterns, the hush of the caldera pool beneath moonlight, and the tremor of her fingertips as she decoded the archives. She closed her eyes, pressed her palms together, and spoke softly. "Selene." In the stillness that followed, the cavern held its breath. Then, ever so faintly, the harp strings began to vibrate. At first, Illyra heard only a whisper like waves curling over distant reefs. Then the sound blossomed into a soft, rippling melody that echoed through the chamber, weaving between pillars of stone and rising toward the dome above. Illyra opened her eyes and watched in awe as each string glowed softly, tinted with moonlight silver. The melody swelled, a song shaped by tides and stars, its notes shifting like currents of water. The shell on the dais trembled, sending tiny ripples across its inner surface, a mirror of the sound's energy. Overwhelmed by the beauty of the music, Illyra felt tears sting her eyes. She realized that the song was more than a tune, it was a key, a resonance that unlocked hidden pathways. As the final note faded, the dais's moss parted, revealing etched symbols around the shell's recess, a constellation of circles and spirals that Illyra recognized from the celestial archives. Darius held out a hand, pointing to the carvings. These symbols marked the path to the observatory's hidden chamber, the place where archives manifest in the tangible world. If you trace them upon the island's map, they form a constellation leading to the celestial well atop Mount Astra. Illyra's heart pounded. Each discovery built upon the last, the cave's spiral carvings, the caldera basin, the celestial archives, and now the tide song harp's melody. All pointed toward a greater nexus, the celestial well, a spring high above the island where sky and sea converged in pure starlight. She knelt beside the dais, pressing her palm against the next symbol. A soft echo resonated through her arm, and in her mind's eye she saw a mountain crowned with a circle of standing stones, water pooling at their center beneath a sky ablaze with stars. Darius placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The well calls you, Illyra. But the journey will be arduous. The path weaves through sun-scorched fields and rocky passes. You must prepare." Illyra nodded, rising with resolve. "We begin at sunrise. I will need maps, provisions, and perhaps a guide who knows those heights." Darius smiled, his staff tapping with renewed energy. "I know the way. But before you leave, record the Tidasong's melody in your journal. Its harmony will guide you when storm clouds gather." He handed her a small quill fashioned from sea silk and a bound folio of blank pages. Illyra set to work immediately, listening to the cavern's lingering resonance and transcribing the melody into symbolic notation: curved lines to represent rising tides, dots for shimmering starlight, and spiral swirls for the song's echoes. By the time she finished, the cavern was quiet once more. The bioluminescent algae had dimmed, and the harp strings hung still. Illyra closed her journal with a soft sigh, slipping the quill into her satchel alongside her other treasures. They retraced their steps through the grotto's tunnel, exiting onto the sunlit ledge just as the tide began to swell. The sea's surface sparkled under the morning sun, as though applauding their success. Casper's skiff bobbed at the harbor below, a reassuring sight. As Illyra and Darius made their descent, she felt the weight of her discoveries settle into her bones. The island had offered her secrets carved in stone, whispered in water, and sung on moonlit strings. Now it beckoned her to ascend, to stand at the crossroads of sea and sky atop Mount Astra and drink from the celestial well. Reaching the marina, she spotted Casper waiting alongside the solstice song. He waved, a grin tugging at his lips as he saw Illyra's satchel bulging with codex, journal, and new folio. "Back so soon? Did the harp sing to you?" Illyra laughed, her eyes shining. "More than that, its song has set me on the path to the celestial well. We leave at first light." Casper's expression turned solemn. "The well is sacred. Few tread its path, and fewer return unchanged. Rest well tonight. Tomorrow, we climb." Illyra offered him Darius's hand. "Thank you for everything. With your guidance, I believe we will honor the island's gifts." He clasped her hand in turn. "Together, then. To the heights." That evening, Illyra returned to her villa under a sky freckled with stars. Lanterns glowed warm against whitewashed walls, and the scent of jasmine drifted through the air. She prepared a simple meal of grilled fish and herbs, then unrolled her map on the terrace. By lantern light, she traced the constellation of Deus's carvings onto its surface, marking the winding route toward Mount Astra. In her journal, she sketched a final diagram: the spiral path from cave to shrine, the basin's circle, the harp's pearls of melody, and the well's promise of unity between moon, sea, and sky. She paused at her drawing, touching the paper gently, and felt a quiet certainty that every note, ripple, and carving had led her to this moment. Soon, she would stand atop the island's summit and drink from the source of Selene's power, weaving her own story into Kythara's timeless tapestry. Illyra closed her journal and tucked it alongside her maps. The moon rode high, a silver sentinel in the sky. In the hush before dawn, she whispered a vow. I will honor your gifts, Selene. I will carry your song to the well, and from there, I will carry you to the world. With that promise in her heart and the melody of tides and stars in her mind, she extinguished the lantern and drifted into sleep, ready to rise with the sun and climb toward the celestial well at the edge of earth and sky. The first pale light of dawn seeped through Illyra's shutters, painting her room in hues of rose and gold. She rose with care, mindful of the long journey ahead. Today, she would leave the safety of Kythara's shores and climb Mount Astra to seek the celestial well. Preparations lay before her, a knapsack stocked with bread baked by Darius's own hands, cured olives, a flask of cool spring water, and her instruments of discovery, Theo's codex, her journal filled with ciphered revelations, the folio of tide song notation, and the iridescent shell of Selene. Outside, Casper waited by the solstice song, but today their vessel would take them only to the mountain's base. He greeted Illyra with a silent nod of respect, his hazel eyes alight with anticipation. Darius appeared with two sturdy walking staffs, each carved with a spiral motif echoing the cave's markings. Illyra, may Selene's blessing guide your steps, Darius intoned as they gathered. Illyra pressed her palm to the shell at her neck before plunging its cord over her head once more, feeling its warmth settle against her heart. They boarded the skiff, and Casper rowed them along the rocky coast toward a small cove threaded with streams that tumbled from higher slopes. The air was alive with the murmur of falling water, mingled with the brine-laced breeze. At the cove's lip, they disembarked onto a pebble beach where a narrow mule track wound upward through oak and cypress woods. The path gained steepness rapidly, forcing Illyra to lean on her staff as she climbed. Dappled sunlight fell through the canopy, lighting ferns and moss in luminous green. Somewhere above, an eagle cried a high, resonant note that echoed Illyra's racing heartbeat. Mount Astra is ancient, Casper said quietly as they followed the trail. She was formed when Kythara rose from the seabed, and sailors once believed her summit housed the star's own heart. Illyra glanced at him, matching her breath to the rhythm of his steps. And the well. They say the well was carved by those earliest island priests, using water drawn from beneath the sea and moonlight distilled in sacred basins. It gathers both in one pool at the summit, where sky and sea converge. Further up, the trail emerged into a sun-scorched band of rock and wild thyme that perfumed the air with its sharp sweetness. Illyra gathered a sprig, tucking it into her satchel. Clinging patches of thyme cushioned her boots as she climbed, each step bringing new vistas of the bay laid out like a broken fan below. By midday, the ascent grew more grueling. Loose stones and gravel forced careful footing. Illyra's staff bit into the ground as she inched forward, each breath drawing in the mountain's thin, herbal-scented air. Darius walked at her side, offering steady encouragement. Rest here, he suggested at a shaded ledge where a small spring emerged from the rock, spilling into a shallow pool. Illyra knelt and cupped her hands, tasting the water cool, mineral-rich, as though flavored by the earth itself. Caspar unshouldered the knapsack and carefully laid out their midday meal, thick slices of bread, soft with olive oil, salty olives, and wedges of goat cheese from a nearby farm. Illyra ate slowly, savoring each bite, knowing they would need every ounce of strength for the climb's final stage. As she rose to continue, she unfolded her map and traced the constellation-marked path. Above them loomed rocky buttresses crowned by stunted pines and marble shards sketched with lichen. The codex had hinted that the path would loop in a spiral around the summit's flank, mimicking the cave's carvings. It was time to follow that spiral. They ascended again, the trail winding ever upward, until tree line gave way to sheer stone slopes. Here, Darius produced a length of silver sea silk rope light yet strong and tied it to an embedded rock. Caspar went first, latching onto the rope with a looped knot, then pulling himself up a narrow chute worn smooth by centuries of trekkers. Illyra followed, her fingers gripping the rope's cool fibers as she hauled herself up, her boots scraping against stone. At last, they reached the plateau just below the summit. A ring of standing stones circled a shallow depression in the earth. Grass grew thick here, and a gentle breeze caused its blades to sway like rippling green waves. At the depression's center lay a sculpted basin of pullstone, exactly as the cipher had described, its surface polished smooth and set into a low dais of native marble. Illyra's heart hammered. She knelt at the basin's rim, brushing away fallen pine needles to reveal the basin's full expanse. It shimmered with dew, each droplet reflecting the pale light of the afternoon sky. She placed her hands on opposite edges, feeling the warmth of stones that had absorbed countless suns and moons. She closed her eyes, recalling the melody of the tide song harp, the cipher's spiral guidance, and the codex's directive, only when moonlight and tide converge may the pool mirror sky's truth. But here at Mount Astra's summit, there was no tide, only the distant curve of the sea. Yet Illyra sensed the basin's resonance in her chest, like a secret chord waiting to be struck. Caspar knelt beside her. "The shell," he said softly, drawing her attention. Illyra reached into her satchel and withdrew Selene's shell, now etched with Journey's landmarks, the cave's spirals, the caldera basin's crescent, and the harp's strings. The shell hummed faintly in her hand, eager to fulfill its purpose. Illyra placed the shell at the basin's center. The moment its rim touched the water's surface, a light breeze picked up, sending gentle waves across the plateaus of grass. The shell bobbed as though alive, and the basin's water glowed for an instant with an opalescent sheen that caught the sun's rays. In that shimmer, Illyra glimpsed a vision: star fields swirling overhead, ancient priests performing rites in the cave's cathedral hall, the galleon sailing under a moonlit sky, and now herself. Standing amidst these echoes of time. Images merged sea and sky, past and present, forming a tapestry of Kythara's living story. She pressed her palm to the shell, closing her eyes and letting the vision settle into her being. A warmth spread through her limbs, and the basin's water stilled in deference. The wind stilled overhead, as though the mountain itself paused to witness. After a moment that felt both eternal and yet too brief, Illyra opened her eyes. The basin's glow had faded, but its water still rippled gently in the afternoon sun. She lifted the shell, now imprinted with a faint spiral glow on its inner surface, an imprint of the summit's communion. Darius placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have bridged sea and sky," he murmured. "The celestial well has revealed its truth, that all journeys are woven in the loom of tides and stars. Take this knowledge with reverence." Illyra bowed her head, tears glinting in her eyes. "I am honored beyond words." She turned to Casper, who held a flask of cool spring water. Together, they poured equal measures into a small cup, a blending of seashell chill and mountain spring clarity. Illyra sipped, feeling the well's essence flow through her veins, filling her with a luminous calm and resolve. They spent the final light of day exploring the summit's edge, where the wind roared down the cliffs and clouds painted patterns across the sky. Illyra sketched the standing stones, noting their sinews of lichen and moss, and recorded every detail in her journal: the basin's shape, the shell's imprint, the silence that fell when sea and sky aligned. As dusk fell and stars emerged in silver ashen flickers, Illyra stood at the plateau's rim and raised her head. The moon, though not yet full, cast a slender arc of light across the basin's surface. 1,000 thoughts flowed through her mind, of pilgrims who had climbed these slopes centuries before, of island lore carried on wind and wave, and of her own story once adrift, now anchored by purpose. She spoke softly, addressing the mountaintop itself. "Thank you, Astra. I will carry your echoes to every shore I touch." The wind answered with a low sigh, as if granting permission to leave. Under a sky strewn with stars, they made camp in the circle of stones, a fire crackling low at their feet. Illyra gazed into the flames, her journal open on her lap. She wrote a final entry for this chapter. "I have stood where sea and sky converge, where tides sing to stars, and where the well holds every secret in its depths. My journey is no longer mine alone, it belongs to every soul who seeks wonder beneath moon and sun. Tomorrow, I descend to share this story with Kythara's children, that they may carry her magic beyond this island's embrace." When her pen stilled, she closed her journal and placed it beside the shell of Selene and the codex. As sleep claimed her beneath the vault of stars, Illyra felt the island's heartbeat echo in her dreams, tides ever turning, stars ever singing, and her own spirit shining bright as a single guide within. The infinite tapestry of Kythara Bay. Dawn's first glow painted the whitewashed walls of Kythara Bay in gentle blushes of rose and apricot as Illyra, Casper, and Darius made their descent from Mount Astra. Their boots crunched on the dusty mule track, and each breath they drew carried the cool hush of mountain air mingled with the promise of sea salt on the breeze. Illyra tucked her journal, still warm from last night's entries, into her satchel alongside the iridescent shell of Selene and the codex of celestial archives, her mind alive with the mountains. Revelations. By midday, they reached the pebble-strewn cove where Casper's skiff bobbed patiently. The village lay spread below like a welcoming tapestry, terracotta rooftops clustered around a central plaza, olive groves darkening the slopes beyond, and the harbor's crescent of boats dancing in turquoise waters. Voices drifted up in faint laughter, the distant trill of church bells signaling morning prayers, and the steady thrum of fishermen hauling in nets heavy with silver glimmer. Illyra paused for a moment on the rocky beach, closing her eyes and inhaling deeply. Every sensory thread of her journey wove together here, the cave's spirals, the shrine's basin, the harp's melody, and the well's convergence of sea and sky. And now, as the island's crest descended into its everyday rhythm, she felt a new purpose kindling within her, to share the island's magic, its ancient stories, and its living wisdom with those who called Kythara home. Casper guided the skiff into shallow water. "We'll tie up at the moonlit harbor," he said, nodding toward the quay where a line of fishermen's boats rested. They prepare for tonight's celebration. Tonight is the eve of the summer solstice festival. It seems fate that you return under a sky that honors the sun at its peak, just as you've honored the moon. Illyra smiled, gratitude blooming in her chest. "Then perhaps our tales will light both sun and moon," she said softly as they climbed onto the dock. They walked through the harbor's bustle, where nets spilled fresh catch across wooden planks and barrels of salted olives were rolled toward waiting carts. The air bristled with energy, merchants haggled over dried fish, children chased each other beneath tangled lines of drying seaweed, and old men sat in the shade, smoking pipes carved from olive wood. As they debated the day's tides, Darius paused before a small group of women who sat weaving wreaths of wildflowers and bay leaves. When they saw him and Illyra approach, their chatter hushed. "Darius. And you must be Illyra," one of the weavers said, rising to greet them. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her hands moved deftly, securing fragrant sprigs into circular bands. Illyra offered her hand. "A pleasure," she said. "I wanted to bring you gifts from the well." She unfurled her satchel and withdrew a small glass vial of mountain spring water suffused with moon-dipped oil water she had drawn from the celestial well, its ripples still echoing sea and sky. She placed it gently on a crate beside them. "Pour a drop into your wounds or your wine, and may Selene's blessing bring clarity and peace." The women gasped softly, touching the vial reverently. One of them dipped a fingertip into the water and tasted its cool sweetness. "It is like drinking the night sky itself," she whispered, eyes wide. "Our wounds, our worries, they will heal under its watch." Illyra's heart swelled as she returned the vial to her satchel. "There is more," she continued, producing a swatch of pale pullstone, a fragment she had pried carefully from the well's basin. Its surface shimmered with opalescent veils. "This shard holds the echo of the celestial convergence. Carry it with you as a token of the island's unity." The women accepted the stone with gratitude, wrapping it in soft cloth. As they did, the bells in the plaza pealed louder, and the harbor's sounds dimmed an unspoken shift that drew all eyes upward. Illyra turned to see villagers gathering on the stone steps that led to the central square, their faces shining in the noonday sun. "What's happening?" Illyra asked a young fisherman passing by on his way to unload a lobster trap. "Today we greet the sun at its highest," he explained, wiping his brow. "But tonight we also honor the moon's turning. This festival dates back millennia. They say that on the eve of solstice, the sun and moon stand in balance, day and night perfect and fleeting." Illyra's gaze drifted toward the horizon where the sun hovered in stark brilliance. A cool breeze whispered through her hair, carrying a hint of lavender and flame. Then tonight, she murmured, we will celebrate the balance you carry in your gifts. Turning, she spotted Darius guiding a small procession of elders up the steps toward the plaza. Among them was the village elder, a tall woman draped in silken robes dyed the color of twilight, her head crowned with a wreath of olive branches entwined with white night-blooming jasmine. Illyra bowed respectfully as the procession emerged into the square's heart. The elder raised her hands, and the crowd stilled. Children of Kythara, the elder's voice rose across the plaza, we gather at midday to bless the sun, and tonight at the same hour, we will bless the moon. But how shall we speak of our blessings, if not through tokens of both sky and sea? At this, Illyra took a step forward, heart pounding with purpose. She unhooked the shell of Selene from around her neck and held it forth. This shell, she called, raising her voice to carry, was guided by moonlight and tides to our island's ancient shrines, to the harp's echo, and to the summit where sea and sky converge. Let it stand as a testament to the stories written in tides and stars. Let it remind us that our island is more than stone and olive, she is a living tapestry of wonders to share. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Illyra placed the shell upon the steps, allowing its iridescence to catch the sun's glare. The elder nodded approvingly and beckoned the villagers closer. Then let us speak our gratitude, she intoned. For sun and moon, for sea and sky, for Illyra's journey that has woven our ancient songs into new hearts. One by one, villagers approached. A fisherman bowed and dipped his net in the harbor, scattering it wide as an offering. A baker poured grain into a shallow basin of water, kneading dough with tears of joy. A seamstress draped the pullstone shard across her freckled palm, whispering a prayer for healing. And all of them, children, elders, mothers, sailors, gathered around the shell, touching it reverently, each imprinting their own silent vow upon its surface. Illyra felt tears sting her eyes as she stepped back. The festival's first blessings were shared, the sun's zenith mirrored by the community's warmth. As the ceremony drew to a close, the elder turned to Illyra and spoke so all could hear, may your story travel beyond this cove, and may we never forget that wonder lives in every corner of our world if only we seek it in tides and stars. With those words, the crowd erupted into cheers that echoed off marble walls and splashed against the harbor's gentle waves. Drums sounded in the distance, a herald of the festival's evening rites, and string players tuned their instruments, ready to continue the island's ancient melody. Casper and Darius joined Illyra's side. You have given them the greatest gift, Darius said softly. Hope that their own stories hold magic as deep as the sea and as vast as the sky. Illyra nodded, her heart full. And you have given me mine, she replied, glancing at the shell and the shard of pullstone nestled among the village's tokens. As afternoon waned into evening, Illyra wandered through the marketplace, now awash in flags dyed sunlit gold and midnight blue. She paused at a stall where children decorated woven bracelets with shells and beads. They watched her with wide, curious eyes as she offered them small sketches of the cave's carvings and the harp's notation, teaching them to weave spiral symbols into their bracelets so that even the youngest could carry a fragment of the island's magic. When she finally returned to her villa at dusk, her satchel was nearly empty of relics, but her journal overflowed with new entries, sketches of villagers' tokens, descriptions of the midday blessings, and notes on the island's living traditions. In the courtyard, Darius and Casper prepared a simple meal of grilled vegetables, fresh bread, and carafes of rose turned palest pink by the sun's final embers. They ate beneath lanterns strung from olive branches, their flickering light mingling with the first stars that shimmered overhead. Illyra raised her glass in a silent toast to both sun and moon, to sea and sky, and to the living tapestry of Kythara Bay. As the final embers of the sun slid beneath the horizon, the lanterns glowed brighter, and a hush fell, a promise that tonight, the island would celebrate the balance of solstice under moonlights. Return. Illyra closed her eyes, listening to the gentle lap of waves against the quay, and in that moment, she understood fully, home was not just a place but a story shared between hearts, carved in stone, sung on strings, and whispered by tides and stars. And tonight, that story would continue, woven anew with every blessing bestowed under the moonlit harbor's gleaming embrace. Night fell like silk over Kythara Bay, soft and seamless, stitched with stars. The plaza, so vibrant in the day, now glowed with an amber warmth from hundreds of lanterns swaying gently in the ocean breeze. They were strung between buildings, draped from balconies, and clustered in hand-woven baskets around the fountains, each lantern a tiny sun suspended in the island's twilight. Above, the moon had returned in full, rising with quiet majesty over the hills, its silver gaze reflecting off the water in perfect symmetry. Illyra stood at the edge of the square, breath held, watching as villagers gathered in ceremonial dress. Their garments shimmered with hues of moonlight and starlight, pale grays, soft blues, and touches of silver thread woven into the hems like whispers of legend. In their hands, they carried lanterns crafted from shells, glass, and silk, each bearing a single candle whose flame flickered as if alive. Casper appeared beside her, dressed in a simple white tunic that bore a spiral stitched in indigo over his chest. "Tonight's the lantern rite," he said softly. "A closing rite for the solstice to send our hopes into the sea." Illyra nodded, clutching her own lantern close. It was made from a hollowed fig shell, its interior polished and painted with the same spiral pattern that had followed her since the cave, since the archives. She had tucked a small scroll inside, inked with a single line. "Let light guide those still wandering, as it has guided me." The village elder raised her arms from the steps of the chapel. Her voice carried gently through the square, weaving into the music that had already begun, flutes and lyres playing a melody as fluid as waves. "Children of moon and sun," the elder intoned, "tonight we release our lights to the sea. In every lantern is a dream, a memory, a blessing. Some are for those we love. Some are for those we have lost. And some are for the paths we've yet to walk." As one, the crowd began to move. Illyra followed, Casper at her side, Darius just behind. They passed under arches of flowering vines lit from beneath, down to the harbor where skiffs and gondolas awaited to carry lanterns to the cove. Illyra boarded with trembling hands, the weight of her journey resting in her palms. The water was calm, each ripple mirroring the lanterns in star-like repetition. Villagers knelt on the decks, lighting their candles, whispering their wishes. Illyra leaned over the boat's edge, touching her lantern one last time before releasing it into the tide. It floated gently away, joining a constellation of others, each dancing on the sea's surface. The effect was breathtaking, a river of stars drifting slowly toward the open ocean, where moonlight bathed them in radiant blessing. But as the final wave of lanterns reached the horizon, something unexpected happened. From the dark sea, a glow returned. At first, Illyra thought it was a reflection. Then, gasps echoed across the water. One by one, the lanterns began to shimmer not with their own flame but from beneath. The ocean itself pulsed with bioluminescence. From below, a slow, rising bloom of light spread outward in concentric circles, like the spirals that had followed Illyra from shrine to summit. Fish darted beneath the surface, illuminating the depths in radiant bursts of blue and green. It was as if the sea had woken. Casper stood, eyes wide. This hasn't happened in decades. The last time the ocean glowed like this during solstice, they said it was a sign the island was ready to reveal another of its secrets. The elder's voice called across the water. The deep spiral, she said. The final archive. Beneath the sea. A memory bound in silence and salt. Illyra's pulse quickened. She looked down at the lanterns, then past them, into the heart of the illuminated sea. Shapes stirred far beneath, pillars of stone, staircases lost to time, and the outline of what might once have been a temple resting on the seabed. That night, no one slept. By morning, the bay was still, as though unsure whether to hold its secret or surrender it. Illyra stood on the beach with Casper and Darius, gazing into the clear water. The lights had faded, but the memory remained, and so did the questions. "I have to dive," Illyra said quietly. "Whatever the deep spiral is, it's part of the archives. Part of this island's soul." Casper placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll prepare. But you won't go alone." Within hours, word had spread. Theo, the museum curator, brought ancient dive charts from the time of his grandfather. Mariana arrived with a bundle of dried herbs to mix with oil for breath and stamina. Even the children from the lantern stall gave her a ribbon soaked in jasmine and sea mint to protect you, they said, from ghosts in the deep. At dusk, Illyra stood once more at the water's edge. This time, her satchel held only what was essential, the shell of Selene, now infused with starlight from the well, a sealed page from her journal, etched with the full spiral sequence, and a small locket from Darius's youth, a charm set to glow in darkness, passed from elder to seeker. Casper held the boat steady as she stepped in. Together, they set course for the cove, where the lanterns had gathered the night before. There, beneath still waters, the deep spiral waited silent, submerged, and ancient beyond imagining. As stars blinked into the sky, Illyra took one last breath of island air and slipped beneath the surface. The sea enveloped her gently, and the spiral welcomed her home. The water embraced Illyra with a silence more profound than anything she had ever known. As she descended into the cove's depths, The world above blurred into memory, only the rhythmic sound of her breathing and the muted thrum of her heartbeat accompanied her now. The sea had transformed from shimmering sapphire to deep indigo, its vastness stretching around her like a suspended dream. Casper's form hovered to her left, a steady presence cloaked in flippers and a tight wetsuit, a beam of soft golden light emanating from the waterproof lantern strapped to his wrist. Behind them, the shadowy shapes of two additional divers, Theo and a young islander named Lyra, followed at a cautious distance. All four had vowed to be part of this dive, this expedition into the unknown realm the villagers now called the Deep Spiral. The water here was unnaturally still. Schools of fish parted around them without sound, gliding like whispers through the filtered light. As they moved deeper, Illyra clutched the shell of Selene close to her chest, encased in a transparent pouch across her suit. It pulsed faintly, glowing in sync with her breath, as if guiding her forward not just toward the ocean floor, but into a truth long buried beneath the sea. It didn't take long for the path to appear. At 30 meters below the surface, the seafloor gave way to an ancient stone arch partially consumed by coral and seaweed, beyond which lay a sloping corridor lined with concentric carvings. Spiral symbols marked the walls, exactly like those found in the cave, the shrine, and the well. Here, however, they were not passive etchings. They shimmered, reacting to the beams of the divers' lights, revealing subtle veins of silver and mother of pearl embedded within the stone. Casper touched Illyra's arm and gestured downward. The corridor descended into a vast chamber. They passed through. The chamber opened like the inside of a forgotten cathedral. Pillars, some toppled, others still erect, rose from the seabed. At its heart, a circular platform lay half buried in sediment. It resembled the basin at the celestial well, but 10 times larger and ringed by statues, some humanoid, others hybrid forms of sea creatures and celestial beings. Time and tide had worn their features smooth, but their outstretched hands and pointed gestures directed clearly toward the center. There, seated upon a raised stone, was a great conch-like structure. Unlike the natural shells scattered nearby, this one was carved clearly artificial. Its spirals mirrored those of Selene's shell and radiated outward in perfect symmetry. Illyra felt the tug. Her body moved as though drawn by unseen currents, and she floated toward the platform's edge. She removed the pouch from her chest and held the Selene shell in both hands. It glowed more brightly now, responding to the presence of its larger twin. A flash no brighter than moonlight on water burst from the conch structure. The water around them vibrated, though no sound reached their ears. Each of the statue's eyes seemed to shimmer in response, casting beams toward the center. The sediment around the platform stirred gently, swirling outward in a perfect circle. Theo's voice crackled faintly through the comm link in their helmets. This isn't just architecture. It's an instrument. A resonance chamber. Illyra moved to the platform's center, aligning the Selene shell with a small recess. It fit perfectly. The moment the shell was seated, the deep spiral awoke. All light dimmed save the pulse from the shell. Then, slowly, faint tendrils of soft green and blue light unfurled from the chamber floor, rising like sea mist, coiling around the statues, and converging in the air above the platform. A vision began. Projected in the water, like a dream made visible, were flickering images scenes from an ancient world, a moon priestess leading rituals on a cliff beneath starlight, artisans carving spiral patterns into stone temples, seafarers blessing their ships under twin arcs of the sun and moon. Then came images of calamity, tides rising, storms crashing, temples consumed by waves. Finally, one last act of devotion, the remaining priestesses descending into the sea with their relics, placing them within the deep spiral as a safeguard, a message to a future dreamer who would listen and understand. Illyra felt tears pool beneath her mask. The chamber's final image showed a figure, not a priestess, not a warrior, but a traveler holding a glowing shell to the sky as villagers gathered below. It was unmistakably a reflection of Illyra herself. The vision faded. The deep spiral's glow dimmed again, but not entirely. The statues now emitted a low, harmonic hum, a song that echoed through the structure like a lullaby sung to the sea. Casper floated toward Illyra, his eyes wide behind his mask. Did you see that?" She nodded slowly, tears breaking free to float in her helmet like tiny pearls. It was a memory. A warning. A gift. Theo added, "This isn't just a temple. It's a vault of consciousness." They poured their collective history into the sea, hoping that one day, someone would hear their voice. They explored for hours. Illyra documented every visible inscription, each pattern etched along the walls. At the conch's base, she uncovered a sealed compartment that revealed an ivory tablet inscribed with lunar cycles and a message. "The stars remember what the earth forgets. And water remembers everything." At last, the current began to pull subtly the sea, reminding them that time above still flowed. One by one, the group ascended, their silhouettes framed against shafts of filtered light pouring down from the surface. When they broke the surface, the bay was awash in silence. The sun was just cresting over the eastern cliffs, and the villagers had already gathered along the shore, waiting. They had seen the sea light up again, heard the faint underwater hum that reached even their ears, and knew something had happened. Illyra climbed ashore, shell in hand, its spiral now glowing faintly even in daylight. She stood before them, soaked but radiant, and spoke. "There is a chamber beneath the sea," she said, voice soft but steady. "It is not ruins. It is memory. A people who came before us entrusted their hopes, their wisdom, and their stories to the ocean. They believed someone would one day return, not to claim it, but to understand it." Darius stepped forward, tears glinting in his weathered eyes. "And so you have, Illyra. You have heard the island's final voice." The village elder nodded solemnly. "And now, you are its voice." That night, a second lantern rite was held, not to send wishes into the sea, but to honor what the sea had given back. This time, the villagers tied small spiral charms to their lanterns, each representing a memory, a blessing, or a vow. Illyra watched the lanterns float once more across the bay. No glowing tide followed this time. But that didn't matter. because the true light now lived within them. Later, in her villa, Illyra sat by candlelight, inscribing a new page in her journal. She wrote not just for herself, but for every soul who would come to Kythara seeking more than a holiday, those who would come for wonder, for truth, for the echo of songs beneath the waves. The deep spiral is not an end, it is a beginning. I am not the keeper of these stories. I am their traveler, their listener, their messenger. The sea holds what the stars have sung, and I have heard the song. And outside, the waves of Kythara Bay curl gently against the shore, their cadence steady, as if whispering, "Welcome home." The morning sun stretched its golden fingers over Kythara Bay, casting long shadows that danced on the cobblestone streets as Illyra prepared to meet the villagers in the central square. The air was alive with anticipation. Word had spread quickly of the deep spiral's unveiling and Illyra's role as its messenger. People gathered, young and old, fishermen and artisans, mothers with children clutching braided wreaths of wildflowers, all eager to hear the tales uncovered beneath the waves. Illyra arrived to find the plaza transformed. Banners embroidered with spiral motifs fluttered from balconies, and tables groaned under the weight of fresh figs, roasted olives, and loaves of fragrant bread. The elder's voice rose above the murmur as she called for silence. "Illyra," she began, "you have heard the island's ancient song and returned with its voice. But stories belong not to one, but to many. Today, we gather to share our memories, our hopes, and weave new threads into Kythara's living tapestry." One by one, villagers stepped forward. A fisherman recounted his grandfather's tales of moonlit voyages, a seamstress shared legends woven into fabric passed down through generations. Children recited poems learned beneath the olive trees, their voices bright and clear. Illyra listened, her heart swelling with connection. She spoke too, recounting her journey from the spiral carvings in the cave to the celestial visions at the well, from the harp's haunting melody to the secrets of the deep spiral beneath the sea. As she spoke, the crowd leaned closer, eyes wide with wonder. She unfurled her journal and showed sketches, ciphered pages, and the glowing shell of Selene. The elder nodded approvingly, then raised her hands in blessing. "Let these stories bind us as one," she intoned, "a circle unbroken, a spiral ever turning. May each voice add light to the moon's glow and strength to the sea's song." The plaza erupted in applause and laughter, lanterns flickering as dusk approached. That night, beneath a sky thick with stars, the village celebrated not just a festival, but a renewal, a promise that their stories, ancient and new, would sail beyond Kythara's shores. Illyra stood beside Caspar and Darius, watching the flames dance in the square. She felt the island's heartbeat steady and strong, its legacy alive in every smile, every whispered legend, every shared song. Her journey had become theirs, and theirs hers, a living story written in tides, stars, and spirals, forever unfolding beneath the gentle watch of Selene's light. The morning after the gathering of stories dawned crisp and clear, with a sky so brilliantly blue it seemed to hold the promise of endless possibilities. Illyra awoke feeling the lingering warmth of the previous night's celebration still humming in her veins. Yet, beneath the joy and connection, a restless whisper called her toward a new adventure, a path hinted at in the deepest reaches of the celestial archives and murmured about in the villagers' tales. After a simple breakfast of fresh figs, honeyed yogurt, and crusty bread, Illyra sought out Mariana, the island's herbalist and keeper of ancient lore. The scent of lavender and sage greeted her as she entered Mariana's workshop, where bundles of dried herbs hung like fragrant tapestries and glass jars glistened with tinctures and oils. "Illyra," Mariana said, her eyes bright with recognition, "I've been expecting you. The archives you have uncovered speak of an oracle's grove, a hidden sanctuary where the island's oldest wisdom still breathes. Few know its path, and fewer still have been deemed worthy to walk it." Illyra's pulse quickened. "Tell me everything." Mariana led her outside, past the blooming gardens where bees hummed among the blossoms. "The oracle's grove lies beyond the southern cliffs, veiled by thickets of myrtle and laurel. Legend says the oracle was a seer who communed with Selene herself, and her voice shaped the island's fate. To find the grove, one must follow the spiral of stars etched upon the night sky, a map only visible to those who carry the moon's blessing." Illyra glanced at the shell of Selene around her neck, feeling its gentle pulse. "Then the journey must begin at night." "Yes," Mariana agreed, producing a small leather pouch embroidered with silver thread. "Inside are seeds from the oracle's garden. Plant them at the grove's edge, and they will guide you home." As night fell, Illyra prepared for the expedition. Caspar and Darius joined her, their steady presence a balm against the unknown. Lanterns flickered as they ascended the rugged southern cliffs, the scent of salt and pine thick in the air. Above, the stars glittered with unusual clarity, and Illyra spotted familiar constellations forming the spiral Mariana had described. They followed the celestial path, winding through shadowed groves and rocky outcrops, until they reached a secluded valley where the air shimmered with quiet power. There, beneath a canopy of ancient olive trees, lay the oracle's grove. Moonlight filtered softly through the leaves, illuminating wildflowers whose petals glowed faintly with ethereal light. At the grove's heart stood a stone altar carved with the spiral emblem, draped in garlands of jasmine and rosemary. Illyra knelt, planting the seeds Mariana had given her at the altar's base. As she did, a soft breeze stirred the grove, carrying whispers of the past, voices weaving through the leaves like a haunting melody. She closed her eyes, listening to the whispers that spoke of futures yet unwritten and truths yet revealed. In that sacred silence, Illyra understood that her journey was far from over. The island's secrets were unfolding, each discovery a thread in a vast, intricate tapestry woven by tides, stars, and the steady light of the moon. Together, beneath the ancient olives and the watchful Selene, they vowed to honor the island's legacy and carry its stories forward into the light, into the world, and into the hearts of all who would. Listen. The cool night air in the oracle's grove seemed to hum with quiet expectation as Illyra, Caspar, and Darius sat beside the stone altar, bathed in the gentle silver light of Selene. The seeds they had planted at the base of the altar shimmered faintly, their delicate shoots curling upwards as though responding to the moon's ancient call. Illyra's eyes traced the intricate spiral carved into the altar's surface, a symbol that had guided her journey from the very beginning. The wind carried soft whispers through the olive leaves, voices half heard and half remembered, weaving a tapestry of sound that connected past, present, and future. Suddenly, from within the shadows of the grove, a figure emerged. Draped in robes that seemed spun from the night sky itself, the woman's face was luminous, framed by hair like woven starlight. Her eyes held the depth of oceans and the wisdom of ages. "I am Lyra," she said softly, her voice like the rustle of leaves and the ripple of water. "The oracle you seek, guardian of Kythara's truth. You have come far, bearer of the moon's light and the sea's memory." Illyra rose, heart pounding. "I am honored, oracle. I seek to understand the island's secrets, to carry its story beyond these shores." Lyra stepped forward and extended a slender hand, revealing a small crystal vial filled with shimmering liquid. "This is the elixir of echoes, distilled from the waters of the celestial well and the breath of the deep spiral. Drink, and you shall glimpse the island's soul, its triumphs, its sorrows, and the path it calls you to walk." Illyra accepted the vial with reverence and drank deeply. The world around her shifted, colors deepened, sounds sharpened, and time seemed to unravel. Visions flooded her mind, ancient priests guiding villagers through rites beneath the full moon, the galleon's final voyage, the building of the celestial well, the tide song harp's first melodies. She saw herself, not as a visitor, but as a thread woven into Kythara's eternal tapestry. When the vision subsided, Illyra found herself back in the grove, tears of awe streaming down her face. "The island calls for a new guardian," Lyra whispered. "One who will protect its legacy, who will bridge the ancient and the new, the seen and the unseen." Illyra's resolve hardened. "I will answer that call." As dawn painted the horizon with hues of gold and rose, the oracle's figure faded into the morning mist. Illyra, Caspar, and Darius remained beneath the olive trees, their hearts bound by a shared destiny. Their journey was far from over. The island's mysteries beckoned still, and Illyra was ready to embrace her role as Kythara's new guardian, a keeper of stories, a protector of light, and a messenger of tides and stars. The golden light of dawn spilled across Kythara Bay, igniting the whitewashed rooftops and olive groves in a soft, warm glow. Illyra stood atop the hill overlooking the village, the iridescent shell of Selene resting against her heart. The weight of the oracle's message settled deep within her soul, blending with the wisdom of the deep spiral and the melodies of the tide song harp. She was no longer merely a visitor, she was becoming the island's keeper, its guardian, its storyteller, its bridge between past and future. Beside her, Caspar and Darius stood silently, their faces lit with pride and solemn understanding. Together, they faced the path ahead, one woven with challenge, hope, and unending discovery. Illyra raised her hand and spoke aloud, the words carried on the breeze like a sacred vow. "I pledge to honor the tides and stars, to protect the stories whispered by sea and sky, and to carry Kythara's light beyond these shores. With humility and courage, I accept the mantle of keeper." As she spoke, a gentle wind stirred the olive branches, and a single leaf drifted down, landing softly in her palm. She smiled, feeling the island's blessing. The village below stirred to life, its people awakening to a new day and a new chapter in their shared story. Illyra knew her journey was far from over. There were still mysteries to unravel, songs to learn, and connections to forge. But with every step, she carried the heart of Kythara within her, steady, luminous, and eternal. And as the sun climbed higher, bathing the island in its golden embrace, Illyra stepped forward, ready to walk the path laid out by the moon, the sea, and the stars. As the sun dipped low beyond the horizon, Kythara Bay shimmered beneath a kaleidoscope of colors: fiery reds, molten golds, and deep purples folding into the coming night. The village had transformed into a living canvas, where every stone and street breathed with anticipation. Tonight marked the Festival of Lights and Shadows, a centuries-old celebration honoring the delicate balance of day and night, sun and moon, known only to the island's most devoted keepers. Illyra stood at the heart of the plaza, her breath mingling with the salty breeze that whispered secrets through olive branches. Around her, villagers prepared lanterns crafted from seashells, woven reeds, and glass painted with spirals and crescent moons. Flames flickered to life, casting a warm glow that danced across faces painted in intricate design symbols of the spiral, the tide, and the eternal dance of the celestial bodies. She wore a flowing gown woven with threads that caught the light, a gift from Mariana, embroidered with delicate patterns of waves and stars. Around her neck hung the iridescent shell of Selene, now softly radiant, as if alive with the island's magic. Casper approached, carrying the tide song harp wrapped carefully in silk. Its strings seemed to hum with anticipation, ready to unleash melodies that would stir the soul and awaken ancient memories. "Are you ready, Illyra?" he asked, his eyes shining. She nodded, the weight of her role settling comfortably upon her shoulders. "Tonight, we sing for the island, for the past and future." The procession began with a slow, reverent pace as the villagers moved toward the shore. Illyra led, carrying a lantern that pulsed softly with a pale blue light, the hue of moonlight dancing on water. The tide song harp's music rose gently, a haunting melody that intertwined with the crashing waves and the call of distant seabirds. At the water's edge, the community gathered in a circle, lanterns raised high, their reflections shimmering in the calm sea. Illyra lifted the harp and plucked its strings, each note resonating like a wave breaking on the shore, soft, persistent, full of promise. As the music swelled, a glow emerged beneath the water's surface, a radiant spiral of light that spiraled upward, coiling toward the moonlit sky. The ocean seemed to breathe, alive with energy drawn from the island's core. Illyra closed her eyes, feeling the connection deepen between the song, the sea, and the stars above. The visions came again: the ancient priests in the cave, the celestial well at Mount Astra, the deep spiral secrets, and now a new image, a glowing tree rooted at the very heart of the island, its branches reaching toward the heavens, its leaves shimmering with the light of 1,000 moons. The elder's voice broke the reverie. "The tree of Selene," she intoned. "It is the source, the living heart of Kythara's magic. Tonight, we honor its light and promise renewal for all who call this island home." Illyra felt a surge of clarity. The island's journey was not only about uncovering secrets but nurturing life, fostering growth, and carrying its spirit forward through generations. The spiral, the tide, the star, they were threads in a living tapestry, woven together by hope and reverence. As the festival carried on into the night, Illyra led the villagers in song and dance beneath the stars, their voices rising like waves in a chorus that echoed across sea and sky. She knew this moment alive with connection, light, and shadow would be etched forever in her heart and in the island's ever-turning story. And as dawn approached, painting the sky anew, Illyra stood once more at the water's edge, the shell of Selene warm against her skin, ready to continue her journey. Keeper of stories, guardian of tides, and messenger of the moon's eternal light. The dawn broke slowly over Kythara Bay, bathing the island in a soft, ethereal glow that seemed to blur the edges of reality. Illyra awoke in her villa with a lingering sense of anticipation, the lingering melodies of the festival of lights and shadows still humming softly in her memory. Yet beneath the warmth of the morning sun, a subtle unease stirred within her, a feeling that the island's story was far from complete. As she prepared for the day, Illyra clutched the iridescent shell of Selene, now imbued with the power and wisdom gathered throughout her journey. The shell pulsed gently against her palm, a beacon calling her toward an unknown destiny. Meeting Casper and Darius in the village square, she shared her restless thoughts. "There is something more," she said quietly. "A whisper beneath the songs, a secret waiting beyond the veil of what we have uncovered." Darius nodded gravely. "The island has many layers," he replied. "Not all are visible to the eye, and some are hidden even from the celestial archives. The veil you feel is the boundary between what has been and what is yet to come." Casper unfolded a weathered scroll from his pack. "There is a place, deep in the northern forests, a grove veiled in mist and shadow. Old legends speak of a portal there, where time folds and the echoes of the past can be heard. Perhaps this is where the island's next story begins." With resolve, the trio set out toward the northern wilds. The path was less traveled, winding through dense olive groves and ancient oaks whose gnarled branches stretched like hands grasping for the sky. Mist clung low to the earth, softening the landscape into a dreamlike haze. As they ventured deeper, Illyra felt the air thicken with magic. The forest was alive with subtle sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an unseen bird, and, faintest of all, whispers that seemed to echo from the trees themselves. At the heart of the grove, they discovered a circle of standing stones, weathered by centuries but still radiating a quiet power. In the center, a shimmering veil of mist hovered, a translucent curtain that danced with shifting colors and pulsed with an otherworldly light. Illyra stepped forward, the shell of Selene glowing steadily in her hand. "Is this the portal?" she whispered. Darius nodded. "It is said that only those who carry the island's true blessing may pass beyond the veil and glimpse the echoes of Kythara's soul." With a deep breath, Illyra reached out and touched the mist. A sensation like cool water and soft silk enveloped her, and the world shifted. She found herself in a realm between time and space, a place where past and present intertwined like threads of light. Around her, visions unfolded, ancient rituals beneath the moon, the building of the celestial well, the voyages of the Selene's grace, and countless moments woven into the island's tapestry. Among the visions, a figure appeared, a woman clad in robes of starlight, her eyes reflecting the depths of the sea. She spoke without words, her message conveyed through emotion and memory. "The island's story is not finished. You are the thread that binds its past to its future. Listen well, for the tide is turning, and a new chapter awaits." Illyra felt tears of understanding spill down her cheeks. The veil was not an end but a beginning, a passage to deeper knowledge and greater purpose. As the mist receded, she found herself once more among the standing stones, her companions close by. The shell of Selene pulsed warmly, affirming the journey ahead. Together, they descended the northern path, their hearts and minds alight with the promise of stories yet to be told and mysteries waiting to be unveiled. The island whispered its secrets, and Illyra was ready to listen. The morning after Illyra's passage through the Vale of Echoes dawned heavy and grey. The usual crisp air of Kythara Bay was thick with humidity, and the olive trees bent low as the wind whispered warnings through their leaves. The village, once vibrant with sunlit cheer, moved with a subdued urgency, as if sensing a shift in the island's ancient rhythm. Illyra stood at the edge of the harbor, the shell of Selene pressed tight in her hand. The visions from the veil, the celestial priestess's warning, the layered tapestry of Kythara's past and future echoed like distant thunder in her mind. She could feel the pulse of the island quickening beneath her feet, a silent tide rising to meet an unseen storm. Caspar approached, his face drawn and serious. "The elders have convened," he said quietly. "They say the tides will change soon, not just in the sea, but in the fate of the island. We must prepare." Darius joined them, leaning on his staff. "The island has always been a place of balance," he said. "The festival of lights and shadows reminded us of that. But balance is fragile. When one side grows too strong, the other must respond." Illyra nodded, knowing their discoveries were not merely relics of the past, they were harbingers of what was to come. At the village square, the elders had gathered beneath the ancient olive tree, its branches heavy with new leaves and fragrant blossoms. Their faces were etched with worry and wisdom as they discussed the cryptic messages revealed through Illyra's journey. The village elder turned to Illyra, her voice steady but urgent. "You have uncovered the island's soul," she said. "But the tides you've awakened bring both light and shadow. The deep spiral song speaks of change, and the veil's message is clear: a reckoning approaches." Illyra swallowed hard. "What must we do?" "Prepare the island," the elder replied. "The celestial well must be guarded, the tide song harp's melody renewed, and the stories carried not just for remembrance, but for protection." Over the next days, Illyra worked tirelessly. She and Caspar traveled between the cave, the shrine, and the mountain summit, strengthening the wards and renewing the ancient rites. Mariana brewed salves and incense, filling the air with scents of myrtle and rosemary. Theo catalogued every symbol and relic, preserving the knowledge for future generations. At night, Illyra's dreams were filled with swirling waters and shifting stars. The shell of Selene glowed softly beside her, a constant reminder of her charge. She wrote in her journal, recording every detail, every feeling, the growing tension beneath the island's beauty. One evening, as the sun bled red into the sea, a strange silence fell. The usual chorus of waves and seabirds hushed, and a heavy mist rolled in from the horizon. Illyra stood at the shoreline, watching as the water darkened and the wind died. Suddenly, From the depths emerged a shape massive and ancient, a shadow beneath the waves that stirred the island's very foundations. Casper grabbed her arm. "The island's spirit has awakened," he said breathlessly. "We must act, now." Together, with the villagers gathered, Ilaro led a ritual beneath the moon's full light. The tide song harp sang its haunting melody, the celestial well's waters shimmered, and the shell of Selene pulsed in time with the island's heartbeat. The battle between light and shadow had begun not with swords, but with song, story, and the unbreakable bond between sea and sky. Ilaro stood tall, keeper and guardian, ready to face whatever tides the future would bring. The days that followed were a tempest of preparation and resolve. Kythara Bay, once tranquil beneath sun and stars, now pulsed with the urgency of an impending trial. Ilaro moved through the village like a beacon, weaving the ancient rites into the fabric of daily life, guiding her people to rekindle the island's protective spirit. She stood beside Casper and Darius atop Mount Astra, gazing out over the churning sea. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, swirling like restless spirits summoned from the depths. The once gentle tides now crashed fiercely against the cliffs, as though warning of an ancient power stirring beneath the waves. The villagers gathered in the central square, lanterns held high against the growing dusk. Mariana's herbs burned in braziers, filling the air with fragrant smoke. The elder's voice rang out, steady and resolute, "Tonight, we stand united, children of the moon and sea, to protect our home, our legacy, and the light that guides us." Ilaro lifted the shell of Selene, its iridescence bright against the gathering gloom. The tide song harp, cradled in Casper's arms, hummed softly, ready to unleash its song of protection. As the first drops of rain fell, the islanders joined in a chorus, a melody born from the deep spiral, the celestial well, and the oracle's grove. Their voices rose in harmony, a tapestry of hope and strength woven with every note. The storm that followed was fierce, lashing the shores with wind and wave. Yet within the eye of the tempest, a calm radiated, a sphere of light anchored by Ilaro's steady heart and the island's ancient magic. When dawn broke, Kythara Bay stood unbroken, the storm spent but the island's spirit unyielding. The sea whispered secrets of gratitude, and the stars twinkled with renewed brilliance. Ilaro smiled, knowing the journey was far from over, but confident that together, with tides and stars as their guides, they would face whatever came next. The sun rose gently over Kythara Bay, casting a golden embrace across the tranquil waters and olive groves. The storm had passed, leaving behind a cleansed world bathed in light and promise. Villagers gathered in the central plaza, their faces bright with gratitude and renewed hope. The island had endured, its spirit unbroken, a testament to the unyielding bond between sea, sky, and those who cherished its secrets. Ilaro stood before them, the iridescent shell of Selene resting at her throat, its glow subtle yet steadfast. In her hands, she held her journal, a tome filled with the island's stories, visions, and songs, a legacy to be shared for generations to come. The elder approached, placing a gentle hand on Ilaro's shoulder. "You have carried Kythara's heart through darkness and light," she said softly. "As keeper, you weave our past and future into an eternal spiral, ever turning, ever growing." Ilaro's gaze swept over the faces before her, children with eyes wide as stars, fishermen weathered by time, artisans crafting new legends. She felt their strength, their dreams entwined with her own. With a clear voice, she spoke. Together, we are the island, a living story written in tides and stars. I pledge to guard this legacy, to listen to the whispers of the sea and sky, and to carry our songs beyond the horizon. The spiral continues, infinite and unbroken. A cheer rose, mingling with the crashing waves and the rustle of olive leaves. Lanterns were lit, their soft light rising like fireflies into the evening air. Music swelled, a melody born of ancient caves and moonlit wells, woven anew by the voices of a united people. Illyra closed her journal and looked up to the night sky, where Selene shone bright, a silver sentinel watching over the island's eternal spiral. Her journey was complete, yet forever beginning anew. Kythara's story would live on, carried in every heartbeat, every whispered legend, and every glimmer of moonlight on the tide. Tuta. Kythara, the eternal spiral, a journey of moonlight, tides, and secrets. Amota. Join Illyra on an unforgettable voyage through the mystical island of Kythara, where ancient legends intertwine with the rhythms of the sea and the light of the moon. From hidden caves etched with spiral carvings to the celestial heights of Mount Astra, Illyra uncovers sacred relics, deciphers celestial ciphers, and awakens timeless magic buried beneath waves and stars. As the island faces an awakening storm, she embraces her destiny as the keeper guardian of stories, protector of legacy, and messenger of tides and stars. Experience a tale of wonder, courage, and eternal connection, where every discovery is a step deeper into a living tapestry woven by time itself. Perfect for lovers of fantasy, mythology, and epic journeys that celebrate the bond between nature and spirit.